The hush before dawn felt like velvet pressed against my ears, muffling even the distant hum of the Hudson River barges that usually groaned awake long before sunrise. I lay in the antique sleigh bed of the carriage house loft, blinking at the timbered ceiling, aware that the next breath I drew would carry me into the day my only child married. My name is Magdalena Celestine Hawthorne, Lena to the few who've earned the shortcut, and I am 64 years and 2 months old. My joints announce storms a full day early. My silver hair has developed curls that were never there in my 30s, and my heart, long thought settled, was about to be thrown into a furnace I had not prepared for. I slipped from the bed and padded across floorboards that sighed beneath my weight, wood as weary as I felt. Outside the east-facing window, dawn bruised the sky lilac, then blushed coral, then spilled molten gold over the Tappan Zee Bridge. I pressed a palm to the glass, drawing steadiness from the chill. Somewhere in the carriage house below, Clara's bridesmaids were already squealing over steamers and eyelash curlers, their voices bright as brass bells. The smell of fresh coffee wafted up the spiral staircase, laced with buttery croissants that someone, Fiona probably, had ordered from the French bakery on Division Street. I dressed slowly, letting ritual calm the tremor coiled beneath my skin. Dove-gray silk trousers, pressed knife-sharp, matching bateau-neck jacket with mother-of-pearl buttons, kitten-heel pumps the color of pewter, and finally my grandmother's paisley scarf, a gossamer whisper of violet and sapphire that still carried the faint scent of her rosewater cologne half a century after her passing. I wound it once around my neck, tucked the tail inside the jacket, and exhaled. My reflection stared back from the cheval mirror, lined, yes, softened around the mouth. Yes, but resilient, resolute. The kind of woman storms circled but could not drown. Downstairs, I found Fiona perched on a bar stool, legs folded under her like a grasshopper in chiffon. "Lena, coffee or mimosa?" She waved a champagne flute already 3/4 depleted. "Coffee first," I laughed. "Mimosas after the photographs." She poured dark liquid into a ceramic mug hand-painted with sunflowers and passed it to me with a grin. Steam wreathed my face. I breathed deep. Costa Rican, single origin, Clara's favorite. The very fact that my daughter had remembered my preference in the chaos of her own wedding morning tugged a thread in my chest. The loft bathroom door opened, and Clara stepped out in a white silk kimono embroidered with magnolias. Her hair, a waterfall of chestnut curls, was pinned off her face with incandescent pearl combs. Even without her gown, she looked luminescent. "Mom," she murmured, padding across the rug to embrace me. I felt the rapid flutter of her pulse through the thin fabric. "Please tell me I'm not dreaming. If you are, we're dreaming together." I brushed a curl behind her ear. "And we know how good our imaginations can be." She giggled, the same breathless trill she'd made at age 6 when she lost her first tooth, and the sound subdued every ghost that had chosen this morning to rattle its chains. By 8 o'clock, the hair and makeup artists wheeled in road cases packed with enough product to stock a Hollywood trailer. The room became a kaleidoscope. Curling iron cords snaked around chair legs, sponges fluttered powder, perfume drifted like invisible veils. I played traffic controller, ferrying croissants, coaxing timid bridesmaids, soothing a seamstress frantic over a misplaced hook and eye. During a lull, Clara settled onto the velvet love seat beside me and tucked her knees beneath her. "Do you remember the story you used to tell me when I was little? The one about the swan who lost her voice?" I laughed. She was a goose, actually, far less graceful, which made the adventure more heroic. "Tell me the ending again." I smoothed her hair. She thought she'd never sing again, but when danger found her family, courage pried her song free. It was louder and lovelier than before because it was forged in fear. "That's you today, darling. Even if you feel small, your voice is ready." Her eyes glistened. "I love you, Mom." We clasped hands, Two women interlinked not merely by blood, but by all the stories we'd survived. Her appendectomy at 11, my breast cancer scare at 49, the divorce when she was 14, 4 endless years, where her bedroom door seemed to form a Berlin Wall between us. Yet here we sat, stronger at the broken places. At precisely 9:23, the carriage house door creaked and Victor Hawthorne strode in. My ex-husband moved like a man who expected rooms to widen in his wake, tall, immaculately tailored, with hair gone silver at the temples in the decade since we last shared living space. He carried a slim black garment bag over one arm and a small robin egg box in the other. He spotted me, paused. A dozen emotions flashed across his face. Surprise, nostalgia, something perilously close to longing. Then the shutters dropped. Lena. Victor. I inclined my head. We had learned politeness after the divorce lawyers had finished sharpening our bones. Clara surged forward, folding him into a hug. "Dad, you're early." "I brought your veil," he said, lifting the garment bag, "and something old." He tapped the box. I watched their exchange from a step back, tasting bitter sweetness. Victor had never failed Clara, not once. He'd failed me in ways that still pricked when I rolled onto my left side at night, but the ledger between father and daughter remained unblemished. Victor's gaze flicked back to mine, and his throat bobbed. He opened his mouth as though to speak, but Fiona's shriek, she'd spilled orange juice onto her chiffon, shattered the moment. The rest of the morning blurred into a montage of satin and laughter. We loaded into 2 limousines, bridesmaids. In the first, Clara and I in the second, Victor following in his own sedan. Each mile toward St. Bridget's wound tighter around my spine. Through the tinted window, I watched the river glint like liquid pewter and wondered who I would be on the other side of this day. St. Bridget's crowed with history, stone quarried in 1843, stained glass imported from Venice, floorboards, smoothed by a century of parishioners' burdens. Ivy scaled its walls, gripping like fingers too afraid to let go. As the limousines slowed beside the wrought iron gate, I saw the parking lot swelling with guests, distant relatives, college roommates, co-workers brandishing gift bags like talismans. Inside, Father Aldrich greeted us at the narthex, his cassock swishing. He clasped Clara's hands. "Your joy lights this whole sanctuary, my child." Clara blushed, and I remembered her first shy steps onto a stage in kindergarten, gold tinsel halo bobbing. Her radiance had always been weapon grade. We filed into the small side chapel, reserved for final preparations. Bright shafts of sunlight pierced the lancet windows, dust motes pirouetting in the beams. The florist finished pinning boutonnieres on the groomsmen. The organist rehearsed a lilting prelude that fluttered the candle's flames. Victor appeared at the doorway, beckoning me out into the cloister corridor. I followed, pulse hammering. "Lena," he began, voice low. The stone walls absorbed his tension, radiated it back. "There's something I need to—" Footsteps approached. Thomas Waverly, the groom, tall and earnest. Victor's mouth snapped shut. "Mr. Hawthorne," Thomas said, dipping a respectful nod. "Ms. Hawthorne, everyone's ready for the processional lineup." Victor pasted on his corporate board smile. "Excellent." Thomas offered his arm to me. I rested my fingertips lightly on the crook of his elbow, caught the faint tremor there. "Breathe," I whispered. "Marrying the love of your life is easier than your bar exam." His laugh wobbled. "I'm not sure about that." The processional began with Fiona, her basket of rose petals swaying. Next came the bridesmaids. In sage green, Clara's favorite color since childhood, the shade of new leaves in April. Clara's entrance followed. The organ swelled, congregation rose, and my daughter appeared silhouetted against the arched doorway, veil shimmering. Victor and I flanked her, her fingers linked through our arms, warm, slightly damp. I heard my breath echo inside my skull. One slow step, then another, down the aisle that smelled of peonies and polished oak. Cameras flashed. I kept my eyes on the marble altar rail, afraid that if I glimpsed Victor's profile I would crack. At the front, Thomas waited, eyes brimming. We placed Clara's hands into his. My fingers brushed his cuff. He clasped them briefly. "Thank you." Then Victor and I diverged. He to the right side pew with his mother and new wife, I to the left, where Clara had saved me a place of honor. The ceremony unfolded in slow, luminous sentences. Vows exchanged, rings blessed, hands bound with a silk ribbon representing unity. Through it all, I sensed Victor's restlessness across the aisle. He dabbed a handkerchief across his brow. His knee bounced. Once he reached inside his jacket again, fingertips grazing that mysterious envelope. An omen whispered through my veins but refused to form words. Finally, Father Aldrich lifted his hands, voice carrying like a ship's bell. "If anyone here knows of a just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." Phrase hovered above us, an archaic relic, seldom taken seriously. Guests shifted, smiled. Clara leaned closer to Thomas, relief already relaxing her shoulders. Then Victor stood. Gasps skittered through the pews. My lungs constricted as though bound by iron bands. Victor's face was ashen, eyes glossy with unshed, tears. He looked not at the priest, not at Clara, but directly at me, as if pleading for something only I could give. A freight train of dread thundered down my spine. I felt the sanctuary tilt. Without conscious thought, I pushed to my feet. The murmurs turned into a stunned hush. Every soul in St. Brigid's suspended between heartbeat and rupture. Victor's lips parted, and I knew that whatever storm he unleashed, I could not, would not, let him weather it alone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Silence strangled St. Brigid's. Even the candles seemed to shrink from the vaulting hush, their flames thinning to sharp white needles as if the air itself had forgotten how to breathe. Victor and I stood, two human exclamation points flanking, the ceremony we had sworn to shepherd safely. Somewhere behind me a chair creaked. Somewhere ahead of me Clara's small, wounded inhale fluttered like a bird trapped behind frosted glass. Father Aldrich's brow furrowed beneath his embroidered mitre. His voice, when it finally emerged, carried equal parts pastoral concern and courtroom gravity. "Mr. Hawthorne, Ms. Hawthorne, on what grounds do you object?" Victor's fingers tightened around the slim envelope he'd withdrawn from his breast pocket. A tremor crossed his jaw, one I'd seen only twice before. Once the night my father died. Once the afternoon the radiologist phoned with my biopsy results. Whatever lived inside that envelope was carved from the same cold marble. I forced my lungs open. "Father," I said, angling my body so my voice could reach both altar and pews, "may we speak in private?" "Only the immediate family and the couple." A ripple of whispering swept the congregation. Father Aldrich hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. Please follow me to the vestry." He turned, green chasuble swishing, and led the way through the low arched doorway beside the organ loft. Clara rose on unsteady feet. Thomas caught her elbow. The pallor in his face suggested he might bolt for the churchyard if not anchored. Together, they followed Victor and me up the short staircase into the vestry, a narrow room paneled in dark oak and scented with beeswax and lilies. A luminous stained glass St. Brigid cast shards of ruby and cobalt across the stone floor. Father Aldrich shut the door, sealing us away from 100 curious eyes. Victor drew a breath that scraped like gravel. "I received this 40 minutes ago, delivered by courier to the church parking lot." He held up the envelope. "Plain manila, business-sized, no return address." My blood cooled. "And?" Thomas asked, voice tight as piano wire. Victor handed the envelope to me instead of the groom. Lena, you should read it first. The paper rasped against my palms. I slid a manicured nail beneath the flap and eased out 3 folded pages. The top sheet bore the letterhead of the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. Notice of impending proceedings, it read in austere capital letters. Name, Thomas Keene Waverly. Violations alleged, 10b-5 insider trading, 17 Avira 1 record-keeping fraud. I skimmed the dense paragraphs, my heart thudding in my ears like mallets on timpani. Attached were photocopies of transaction logs from Waverly and Price Asset Management, Thomas's former employer, highlighted with alarming zeal. The final page was a printed screenshot from a financial news blog speculating about sealed indictments connected to a junior partner whistleblower whose cooperation collapsed last month. I looked up. Thomas's eyes darted between mine and Victor's. This is absurd. I left Waverly and Price because they were skirting compliance, yes, but I filed a complaint with the SEC months ago. I'm the whistleblower, not the target. Then, why does this notice name you? Victor demanded. His voice echoed in the stone chamber. Thomas spread his hands helplessly. Someone's framing me. Clara stepped between them, veil quivering. Let's slow down. Daddy. She turned to Victor. Where did the envelope come from exactly? A courier in a navy jacket, Victor said. He said it was urgent and specifically for me. His gaze flicked to me, beseeching. Lena, you know I wouldn't sabotage our daughter's wedding without reason. Reason. The word tasted of copper. We need verification, I said, slipping the documents back into the envelope. Father Aldrich, could we have 10 minutes? Ask the congregation to remain seated. Tell them there's a minor medical concern. He inclined his head and exited, robes whispering. I pulled my phone from my clutch and dialed Meredith Phillips, a college roommate turned white-collar defense attorney. 8 rings, voicemail. I tried her direct line, voicemail again. On the 3rd call, she answered, breathless. Lena, everything okay? I summarized in terse sentences. She whistled. SEC notices don't get hand-delivered by anonymous couriers. Forward a photo. I'll run the docket. I snapped quick images of each page, texting them with shaking thumbs. Meredith promised to call back. Thomas buried his face in his hands. Clara stroked his shoulders. I watched them. My daughter's ivory gown pressed against his black tuxedo like snow against obsidian, and a fierce protectiveness surged through me. Whatever this was, we would unravel it. 10 minutes stretched into 20. In the nave beyond the vestry wall, the organist cycled through calming hymns, but the muted chatter had thickened, uneasy. Father Aldrich popped his head around the doorframe twice. Each time I replied, A moment longer, please. Meredith finally rang back. There's no open investigation under Thomas's name, at least not publicly. Could be sealed, but the form number in that notice is out of date, stopped being used 5 years ago. I exhaled. So it's fabricated. Looks that way. But someone went to great lengths. The transaction logs are genuine, pulled straight from What and Peas. Servers! Thomas's head jerked up. Those logs were restricted. Only compliance and senior partners had access. You have enemies, Victor said flatly. So does any lawyer who drags a firm's skeletons into daylight, Thomas shot back. I told Clara about the whistleblowing months ago. Clara nodded, eyes shining. He was protecting retirees whose pensions were being cannibalized. Victor rubbed his forehead. Then why didn't you explain that publicly, Tom? Why keep it quiet? Because the SEC asked me to, Thomas said. Until the investigation finishes, I can't discuss details without jeopardizing it. The room vibrated with tension. A.E. Cello string stretched to breaking. I looked at Father Aldrich, hovering like a worried crane. We need air. Can you invite the guests to the courtyard for refreshments while we sort this? Of course. He hurried away. We emerged into the nave, 4 fractured souls disguised in wedding finery. The guests rose, concern rippling like a wind-blown field of wheat. I climbed 2 steps onto the chancel and addressed them. Dear friends, there's been an unexpected legal matter requiring brief attention. The ceremony is not canceled, only paused. The church has kindly provided refreshments in the rose garden. Please stretch your legs. Murmurs, nods, the rustle of gowns. Ushers guided people toward the side doors. In minutes, the sanctuary emptied, leaving only flickering candles and forgotten programs. Victor locked eyes with me across the aisle. We need answers. We need unity first, I countered. Attacking each other only helps whoever planted that notice. Thunder rumbled. I glanced through the clear-story windows. Storm clouds bruised the sky. Clara shivered. I draped my grandmother's scarf around her bare shoulders. We retreated to the parish library, a circular room lined floor to ceiling with theological tomes. Rain began to drum against the leaded glass. Victor paced between carved reading tables. Thomas stood near the fireplace, knuckles white on the mantel. Clara sank into an upholstered chair, gown pooling like spilled milk. I chose the straight-backed bishop's chair and folded my hands. Let's chart what we know. 1. Thomas filed a whistleblower complaint. 2. Someone with access to confidential logs forged notices to implicate him. 3. They delivered them to Victor, perhaps betting on paternal instinct. Victor halted, meaning they anticipated I'd object. I softened my tone. Any father would. Thomas exhaled. My firm's senior partner, Martin Price, always resented me. I uncovered trades he executed via shell accounts. If I'm discredited, the SEC's case weakens. Lightning forked outside, illuminating stained glass and violent prisms. Clara jumped. We should postpone the ceremony, Victor said. Postpone? Clara's voice quavered. Daddy, we promised each other today. Better a delayed promise than a ruined life, he replied. Tears welled in her hazel eyes. I felt the mother wolf inside me bare its teeth. Victor, postponing hands victory to whoever's orchestrating. This, we investigate. Clear Thomas. Then we walk Clara back down that aisle. Thomas swallowed. I won't let Clara step into scandal. Scandal finds us regardless, I said. What matters is how we respond. A thunderclap shook the rafters. At that exact moment, the library door opened, and 2 men in dark suits entered, water beating on their shoulders. The taller flipped a badge, New York Attorney General, Bureau of Financial Crimes. Is Mr. Thomas Keene Waverly present? He asked. Clara's gasp cleaved the hush. Thomas stepped forward, jaw set. I'm Thomas. The agent unfolded a warrant. Mr. Waverly, you are under arrest on charges of securities fraud and obstruction of justice. The world tilted. Clara lurched to her feet. Victor seized her arm. I rose, heart thundering. The shorter agent approached with cuffs gleaming. You can't, Clara whispered. But they could. And they did. Rain pummeled the church steps as they led Thomas, wrists bound, toward a waiting, unmarked sedan. Flashbulbs burst. Someone had tipped off reporters. Clara sobbed. I wrapped my arms around her, shielding her from the cameras. Victor marched beside the agents, voice booming legal threats, but the taller agent ignored him. They placed Thomas in the back seat. He caught my gaze through the rain-blurred window. His lips formed 2 words. I'm innocent. The car pulled away, taillights bleeding red along wet cobblestones. Clara sagged against me, trembling. Mom, what do we do now? I stroked her damp hair. We fight. Lightning split the sky once. More, framing Victor's stricken profile. Behind him, Father Aldrich emerged, umbrella unfurled, confusion etched in every wrinkle. but my attention fixed on a figure across the courtyard, a man in a charcoal trench coat, holding a phone to his ear. For one heartbeat, our eyes met. He smiled, an infinitesimal twitch, then turned and melted into the rain. Something cold siphoned the heat from my veins. By late afternoon, we were seated in a fluorescent interrogation room at the county courthouse. Meredith had driven up from the city, stilettos clicking like gunshots. She argued bail with prosecuting attorneys while Clara, Victor, and I huddled on metal chairs. Clara's mascara streaked down her cheeks. I dabbed it with a tissue. "You still look beautiful," she managed a frail smile. "Thank you for believing in him." "Belief is easy," I said. "Proof is trickier. But we'll find it." Victor scrubbed a hand over his face. "I'm sorry, honey. I should have come to you instead of objecting publicly." She squeezed his hand. "I know you were trying to protect me." Meredith burst in, eyes glittering. "Bail set at 150. I can cover the bond. He'll be out in an hour." Relief stabbed my chest so hard I swayed. Night draped the city when Thomas finally emerged, jacket folded over his shackled wrists. The cuffs were removed. He rubbed red marks into his skin. Clara flew into his arms. Meredith steered us toward a conference room. "The charges rely on evidence identical to that forged notice," she said. "Someone fed the bureau doctored logs. We need the originals." Thomas's eyes lit. "I kept a backup on a secure drive, hidden in my office at the firm." "Then that's our next stop," I said. "It's locked after hours," Thomas warned. "Security cameras, motion sensors." Meredith tapped her phone. "We'll get a court order by morning, but the sooner we secure the drive, the better." Clara looked at me, shaking her head. "Mom, you're not planning a heist." "I'm planning to protect my family," I replied. "Heist is optional." Victor stared at me, half amused, half terrified. "You haven't changed." "I have," I whispered. "I'm stronger than the woman who signed those divorce papers." His eyes softened, but before he could speak, Meredith clapped her hands. "Focus, people. We regroup at dawn." We left the courthouse into humid darkness. Sirens wailed in the distance. Thomas and Clara rode with Meredith. Victor offered me a seat in his sedan. For once, I accepted. The carriage house loomed silent, bridal bouquets wilting on the porch. Inside, I brewed chamomile tea while Victor stoked the fireplace. Rain tapped the roof like anxious fingers. "You still hate storms," he said, handing me a blanket. "I hate surprises more." I sipped tea, scalding my tongue. "Do you believe Thomas now?" Victor watched the flames. "I believe you, Lena. That's enough." My throat tightened. Years of resentment hung between us like old wallpaper, but tonight some of it peeled away. I set my mug down and reached for his hand. A sudden thud rattled the front door. We jolted. Victor crossed the room, pulled it open. No one on the porch, only an ivory envelope weighted by a stone. He brought it inside. The envelope bore my name in looping script. I slit it. One glossy photograph slid out. Clara in her wedding dress, snapped through a telephoto lens, time-stamped 10 minutes ago. Beneath it, a typed message. "You should have let the ceremony proceed. This is only the beginning." The room lurched. Outside, a car engine revved and faded. Victor locked the deadbolt, chest heaving. I stared at the photograph, my daughter frozen in innocence, while unseen eyes watched. A storm raged beyond the windows, but the one brewing inside our fractured family promised to be far more violent. Rain thrummed against the carriage house skylights like 1,000 anxious fingertips. Victor bolted the remaining lock, his breath fogging the glass. I clutched the photograph, a metastasized threat disguised in glossy cardstock, and felt a chill seep into my marrow. Somewhere, someone had Clara in their crosshairs, and I had no idea how large their scope was. Victor traced the script on the envelope with a forefinger. They knew exactly where to find us. And when to strike, I added. Midnight. Intimidation. A precision cut meant to sever our sleep from any chance of peace. Thunder cracked. A bulb flickered overhead. Victor slipped the photograph into a Ziploc evidence pouch. His years on corporate boards had trained him in chain of custody paranoia, and tucked it inside the safe behind the coat closet. I watched him spin the dial. The tiny clicks sounded like bones snapping. "I'll post security tomorrow," he said. "Private firm, vetted." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. We parted in the hallway, Victor to the guest room, I to the loft. Upstairs, the bridal detritus, silk ribbons, empty champagne flutes, forgotten shoes, looked surreal beneath the storm-strobing skylights. I fell onto the bed fully clothed, scarf still knotted at my throat, and let the world blur. I woke to my phone vibrating insistently against the nightstand. 4:12 a.m. Meredith's name flashed. I fumbled the slide bar. "Lena, we have a problem." Her voice crackled with city background noise, sirens, honking taxis. I sat up. "Another problem? We're running short on shelf space." I pulled. "Strings at the courthouse for an emergency evidentiary order," she said. "But someone beat us to Thomas's office. Security found the door jimmied 30 minutes ago. Hard drives wiped." A curse slipped from my lips. The backup? Gone. Any physical docs that might exonerate him were torched in a shredder. Security footage shows 3 intruders in ski masks. My pulse hammered. "They're tightening the noose." "More like strangling due process in its crib," Meredith replied. "I'm filing motions, but we need new leverage, something they missed." I gazed at moonlit rain streaming down the window pane. Thomas kept client correspondence at his apartment, boxes in the attic labeled by case code. He mentioned them during seating chart hell. Good. I'll send an associate to catalog. Also, I pulled the courier firm's manifests. The guy who delivered Victor's envelope never existed on their payroll. So our adversary manufactures people as easily as paper. Precisely. Get some rest. I'll update at dawn. Rest? Impossible. I crept downstairs. Victor sat at the kitchen table, silver hair mussed, reading the photograph under a desk lamp. Couldn't sleep either. He asked. "Insomnia is the one matrimonial asset we still share." I poured herbal tea, hands trembling. We lapsed into silence until the kettle whistled. Victor spoke first, voice hoarse. "I believe Thomas now. Whoever's staging this has resources, legal, financial, maybe even political. Martin Price, I guessed. Thomas said he administered shell accounts. He would kill to protect them." Victor's gaze hardened. "Then let's break him." I raised an eyebrow. "The last time you and I teamed up, we renovated a kitchen, not toppled a criminal empire." "Same principles apply," he said, almost smiling. "Identify rot, rip out cabinets, expose mold. Only difference is the mold fights back." A laugh escaped me, raw, surprised. In that moment I saw the man I married decades ago, strategic, daring, infuriatingly persuasive. The years had sandpapered. Away softness, but the steel remained. At 7, we reconvened in the carriage house living room. Clara sat curled on the couch, wedding gown replaced by faded Cornell sweatpants, nails bitten ragged. Thomas, free on bail, paced near the fireplace, a storm of anxieties swirling behind his eyes. Meredith arrived with takeaway coffees and a laptop still humming with courthouse Wi-Fi. Bail conditions. Thomas must remain within state lines and surrender his passport by noon. She slid a document across the coffee table for his signature. He signed, jaw taut. "Any progress?" "No new evidence yet," Meredith admitted. "But Judge Pryor agreed to fast-track a discovery hearing 2 days from now. We need ammunition." Thomas inhaled sharply. They wiped my office. Digital forensics says drives were zero filled. But there's an off-site server I rented personally. I backed up everything there before I went to the SEC. Clara shot upright. You never told me that. The fewer who knew, the safer, he said. It's in a co-location center. In Jersey. Secured by biometric scan. My heart quickened. Martin Price wouldn't know about it? No, the lease is under an LLC only my attorney and I can access. Meredith closed her laptop with a snap. Field trip then, but we'll need to move quietly. Price might be monitoring your accounts. Victor leaned forward. I'll bankroll a private security escort. Black SUV, tinted windows, no plates traceable to any of us. Thomas shook. His head. That'll look like a convoy. We need inconspicuous. I raised my hand. I have a suggestion, one that involves dusty memories and a little subterfuge. All eyes turned. I paced to the coat closet, pulled down a cardboard garment box. Inside lay a vintage 1989 Volkswagen camper key. Meet Daisy. She's slow, loud, and about as anonymous as a chipped teacup. No GPS, no digital footprint. Clara's lips parted. You kept the van? She and I toured every national park east of the Mississippi after the divorce, I said, fondness threading my tone. She hasn't failed me yet, Meredith grinned. Low tech beats high tech. Let's roll. Daisy sputtered to life in a plume of bluish exhaust, her cassette deck blasting Joan Baez before I hit eject. Victor crammed his 6-foot frame behind the passenger dash, legs nodding awkwardly. Clara perched between front seats, clutching a thermos. Thomas rode in back with Meredith and 2 duffel bags stuffed with legal pads, flash drives, and protein bars. The storm had blown east, leaving the sky rinsed and glassy. We trundled south across the bridge, morning commuters overtaking us in sleek hybrids. Despite everything, the rust-sweet smell of Daisy's cabin, the rattle of her windows, filled me with a warped nostalgia, a reminder that life's worst. Crossroads sometimes lead to the sweetest detours. 2 hours later, we pulled into a nondescript industrial park in Secaucus. The Colo Center looked like a massive gray shoebox, topped with whirling HVAC units. A lone receptionist behind bulletproof glass scanned our IDs. Thomas pressed his thumb to a biometric pad. A light blinked green, and a security gate yawned, open. Inside, rows of server racks glowed cobalt in the dim light, fans humming like distant wasps. Thomas guided us to a corner cage. He unlocked a steel cabinet and withdrew a silver briefcase. Inside nestled a pair of 4-terabyte drives. Mirror copies, he whispered, almost reverently. Meredith slid them into anti-static sleeves. We'll image these tonight and stash one off-site. Victor exhaled. Let's get out before anyone notices. We retraced our steps to the lobby, only to find 2 men in suits arguing with the receptionist. One held a laminated badge reading, Financial Crimes Task Force. The other clutched a printed subpoena. Clara's grip on my elbow tightened. They look like the agents from yesterday. My pulse spiked. Thomas whispered, Different division. Price must have tipped them. The receptionist pointed toward the back hallway, the very hallway we had emerged from moments earlier. Meredith grabbed my hand. Side exit now. We ducked into a maintenance corridor just as the agents entered the server floor. Heart pounding, I fumbled with Daisy's keys, dropping them once before the engine finally coughed awake. We rolled out the back lot. Tires. Crunching gravel, as sirens wailed somewhere beyond the warehouses. Halfway up the Palisades Parkway, Thomas leaned forward. Those agents will subpoena the facility logs. They'll know we removed the drives. Then we make their data worthless by duplicating it everywhere, Meredith said. 1,000. Journalists receiving encrypted dumps simultaneously. Try spinning that. Victor glanced at me. Always the scorched earth strategist. I shrugged. You taught me well. Clara closed her eyes, head resting on Thomas's shoulder. For the first time since the church, I saw something like hope flicker in her expression. Back at the carriage house, we set up an impromptu war room, laptops on every surface, whiteboards scrawled with timelines, post-its mapping prices, offshore shells. I brewed pot after pot of coffee until the kitchen smelled like a Colombian hillside. Meredith's associate arrived with banker's boxes from Thomas's attic. Inside, printed emails, compliance memos, a worn leather journal filled with shorthand notes, and, tucked in the back pocket, an SD card. "What's on it?" Clara asked, voice hushed. Thomas inserted it into his laptop. A folder opened, Audio and Rex. We clicked. Static, then a conversation. Martin Price boasting to an unknown investor about burying that sanctimonious puppy if he ever squealed. Dates and times stamped. Meredith's smile could have sliced diamonds. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Leverage." We spent the next hours compiling dossiers, cross-referencing trade timestamps with Price's recorded boasts. As dusk painted the windows rose gold, Victor ordered Thai takeout and insisted we eat, even if conspiracy tasted better than pad Thai by then. After everyone bedded down, Meredith on the couch, Thomas and Clara in the loft, Victor in the guest room, I retreated to the den with a legal pad. I wrote a list: church incident, forged. Notice, arrest, server breach, photo threat. At the bottom, I scribbled a question that refused sleep. What if we're missing the real motive? I tapped my pen. Price's vendetta explained framing Thomas, but the photograph felt different, personal, an intimidation tactic, aimed at me, and by extension, at Clara. Price might be ruthless, but he preferred boardroom warfare, not late-night voyeurism. I circled the photo threat twice. A floorboard creaked. Victor patted in, hair tousled. He handed me a cup of lukewarm tea. "You're building constellations out of this madness." "Trying," I said. "But some stars don't belong." I gestured to the photo. "This is not Price's style." Victor studied the image. "Could be someone else piggybacking?" "On the chaos." "Someone who knew I'd object if you did," I murmured. Then a memory flashed. The man in the trench coat at the church, smiling. I described him to Victor. He frowned. Could be a private investigator. Price hires them? Or could be hired by someone closer? The thought slithered through me before I could cage it. Victor's gaze sharpened. "You're not suggesting Clara's being stalked by... I'm suggesting we broaden our lens." "Before." He could reply. The bedside intercom crackled. Static. Then Clara's panicked voice. "Mom! Dad, come upstairs." We bolted. In the loft, we found Clara clutching her phone, face blanched. She thrust the screen toward us. A live video feed displayed Thomas asleep on the futon, filmed from above. An anonymous account had sent the link. "Seconds ago." "Someone's inside the house," Clara whispered. Tears trembled on her lashes. Victor pulled a handgun from the ankle holster I hadn't known he still wore. He motioned for silence and crept toward the spare bedroom. I wrapped my arms around Clara, heart battering my ribcage. A crash sounded downstairs, Meredith yelling, "Who the hell are you?" Followed by a masculine grunt. Victor charged. I followed. In the foyer, a masked intruder wrestled with Meredith, hand reaching for a canister of pepper spray on her keychain. Victor leveled the gun. "Freeze!" The intruder shoved Meredith aside and bolted through the open door. Victor pursued into the night, but the man vaulted a garden wall and vanished into the dark woods. Meredith staggered back in, rubbing her shoulder. He was downloading files off my laptop. I bent to retrieve a flash drive knocked to the floor. Stamped on it, the same rook-shaped logo that appeared on the forged notice. My pulse skidded. Meredith examined it. Whoever he is, he wants our evidence, and he's willing to break into a house full of people to get it. Clara trembled. Thomas stormed down the stairs, fists clenched. "We call the police." "And tell them what?" Victor said. frustration searing his tone. That a ninja stole our data while we chased conspiracies? They'll confiscate everything and bury us in procedure. I turned the Rook logo flash drive over in my palm. Something rattled inside, loose. I pried it open with the tip of a hairpin. A micro SIM card tumbled out. Meredith's eyes widened. Tracking chip. He planted it so they could monitor our network remotely. I crushed the SIM under my heel. Not anymore. But the fact remained. We were being hunted on multiple fronts, by enemies sophisticated enough to anticipate our every move. Price, or someone beyond him, had declared war. Lightning flickered on the horizon once more, outlining the treetops in silver. I met Victor's gaze. Tomorrow, we stop reacting. We strike first. Yet even as the resolve settled in my bones, the night had one final horror to unveil. When I returned to the den for my legal pad, I found a new object resting atop it. A chess rook carved from mother of pearl, still beaded with rainwater. No broken window, no forced door, just the silent declaration that someone had breached our sanctum while we chased phantoms. Etched into the rook's base were 4 digits. 608, tomorrow's date, a warning, or a deadline. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight. In 24 hours, something devastating would unfold unless we deciphered the rook's message. Rain began again, steady and merciless, drumming out any illusions we still clung to about normal life. And I, Magdalena Celestine Hawthorne, understood that my daughter's ruined wedding was merely the opening gambit of a far deadlier game. Game pieces rarely reveal their strategy until the board begins to burn. Dawn found me standing in the rain-damp garden behind the carriage house, clutching the pearl rook like a relic pried from Pompeii's ash. Wind hissed through the maple, branches scattering drops onto my face as if the sky itself wept for what the day might demand. Inside, the others slept fitfully, except Victor, whom I could sense behind me before I heard his footsteps. He rested a hand on my shoulder, thumb brushing the rook's polished crown. "We'll beat them, Lena," he whispered. I wished I could borrow his certainty, pour it into the hollow behind my sternum where terror nested. Instead, I turned the rook over, studying the etched numbers again. 0608, June 8th. Today, a deadline or a detonation. When I was 10, I murmured, my grandfather taught me chess in this garden. He called the rook the castle that moves, said it looked rigid but could traverse the board in startling straight lines when provoked. Victor's mouth curved. Your grandfather was a wise man. I keep thinking about the straight lines, their velocity, their refusal to veer. Whoever left this is telling us their move will be direct, unstoppable. Let's learn which line before it strikes. By 7:30, the war room buzzed like a hive straddling collapse. Post-its bloomed across the whiteboards, string, threaded between thumbtacks, forming webbed hieroglyphs of greed and betrayal. Thunderclouds massed on the horizon again, bruising the sky a deep cobalt that mirrored Clara's sleepless eyes. Thomas sat before 3 monitors, fingers flying across keys, decrypting his own data archives, while Meredith coordinated with investigative journalists hungry for scandal. Victor phoned private intelligence contacts, voice low and urgent. I spread photographs and documents across the dining table, Price's property holdings, campaign donations, board affiliations. One name recurred beside Price's in half the filings, Maricel Investments, a Cayman-registered fund managed by, shock rooted me to the floor, Catherine Lane Hawthorne. Victor's new wife. I felt the blood drain from my face. Across the room, Victor's phone rang. He stepped outside. To answer. I traced Catherine's signature on the filings, cold realization blooming like frost. Price wasn't our sole enemy. A partner inside our family circle had guided his blade. At 9, a courier delivered a parcel. A mahogany box sealed with red wax. Inside lay a single black king chess piece painted in matte obsidian, heavier than carved wood should feel. Attached note: bring the king to the match or forfeit. Location 6 p.m. See inside. We pried off the felt base of the king, revealing a micro SD card. Meredith loaded it. A video opened. Clara walking into the rose garden at St. Brigid's the day before, filmed from behind latticework. She knelt to adjust her train while an unseen lens zoomed onto her bare neck as though lining up a shot. The timestamp read 0608-14. A frame later, crosshairs appeared. Clara gasped, hand flying to her throat. I snatched the laptop shut. Enough. Thomas wrapped his arms around her, fury sparking his features. Their threatening lethal force. Meredith retrieved a plain envelope folded beneath the chess king's velvet cradle. Inside was a printed map, Price Manor, Cold Spring Harbor. 180-acre estate ringed by forest and private shoreline. In red ink, South Portico, 6 p.m. Bring data drives and rook. Victor returned, pallid. I traced Maricel Investments straight to Catherine's family office. She and Price chair its board. He sank into a chair. My wife financed this operation. Silence sucked the oxygen from the room. Clara's eyes brimmed. Stepmother Catherine? She braided my hair at Thanksgiving. I clenched my fists. Catherine was always genteel, philanthropic, disarmingly warm. The kind of warmth that conceals a hearth's hellfire. She leveraged me, Victor whispered. Used my protective impulse to derail the wedding. Question is why, Thomas said. What does sabotaging us gain them? I laid out the map. Price's SEC exposure threatens his empire. If Thomas's dataset goes public, Maricel's share portfolio collapses. Catherine's fortune dissolves and Victor's by extension. Destroy the evidence, discredit the whistleblower, preserve billions. Victor rubbed his eyes. She'd risk Clara's life for money? My voice cracked. Some castles hide dungeons. The plan that emerged was reckless, stitched together. With desperation and duct tape faith, we would attend Price's black tie charity gala at 6, an event we discovered via society pages, posing as wayward socialites bearing a peace offering. Victor would exploit his invitation +1 to bring Meredith. Clara and I would accompany Thomas as technical consultants for the charity's silent auction software. Daisy was out. We rented a black Lincoln Town car from a no-questions-asked garage and used burner phones. 4:30. Transformation time. Clara slipped into a navy satin gown that masked her hollow eyes beneath elegance. Thomas donned a tux borrowed from Victor's wardrobe. Meredith pulled her hair into a chignon sharp enough to cut glass. Victor and I dressed in matching charcoal ensembles, our solidarity silent but steel cord. Before loading into the town car, I pocketed the pearl rook and black king. The drives remained in a titanium case handcuffed to Thomas's wrist until the last possible second. No heroics, I warned. We negotiate, record confessions, secure evidence, and leave. Yet I knew the night would demand heroics nonetheless. Price Manor rose from manicured lawns like Versailles, exiled to Long Island. Lanterns flanked a marble stairway sweeping to the south portico, where liveried valets guided Teslas and Maybachs under a canopy of fairy lights. We joined a procession of tuxedos and gowns. No metal detectors. Price preferred opulence to caution, but security staff in discreet earpieces scanned faces. One nodded at Victor, recognizing him from financial columns, and waved us through. Inside, baccarat chandeliers drenched the atrium in molten gold. A string quartet played Vivaldi near an ice sculpture shaped like the charging bull of Wall Street, irony begging for applause. Price appeared atop the grand staircase, tux lapels gleaming. His eyes skimmed the crowd until they speared Thomas. A smirk ghosted his lips. Catherine emerged beside him, immaculate in crimson silk. She pressed a kiss to Price's cheek as cameras flashed. The gesture was proprietary, intimate, the alliance made flesh. Victor stiffened. I looped my arm through his, grounding him. A maitre d' directed guests toward the ballroom for cocktails. We drifted with the tide. Thomas's sleeve brushed mine. The titanium case at his wrist clicked gently with each step. I copied the drives onto 6 encrypted USBs, he murmured. 3 are on me, 3 disguised as favors in Clara's clutch. If they seize these, redundancy survives. Let's pray we don't need the backups. At 5:52 p.m., we positioned ourselves near the south portico's French doors. The gardens beyond flooded with sunset lamplight. Price and Catherine descended the stairs, flanked by 2 private guards. Price's voice carried over the quartet's swell. Thomas, I'd almost believed the tabloids. You do enjoy a spectacle. Thomas lifted the titanium case. I'm here to return what you so desperately wanted. Price's gaze flicked to the case, then to me. Magdalena Hawthorne. The Queen Mother herself. He chuckled. Your loyalty to lost causes is inspiring. I smiled thinly. I find lost causes make the best revolutionaries. Catherine's eyes glittered. Magdalena, darling, you look radiant for a woman bearing such heavy stress. Stress builds muscle. Price clapped once. Shall we negotiate in private? The conservatory is perfect. He gestured. His guards ushered us down a side corridor lined with gilt mirrors, reflecting our tense faces ad infinitum. The conservatory smelled of orchids and ozone from hidden misters. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed the rose garden outside, where evening wrapped petals in velvet shadows. Price folded his hands behind his back. The drives, Thomas. Thomas set the case. On a marble bench. Drop the charges, clear my name, and they're yours. Otherwise, these go to every regulator and journalist on my speed dial. Price laughed softly. You overestimate your bargaining power. He snapped his fingers. A screen lowered from the ceiling, displaying a live feed, a rooftop sniper sight. Picture trained on Clara. Crosshairs rested against her temple as she stood conversing with a philanthropist by the punch fountain. My breath ceased. Clara, oblivious, sipped champagne. Catherine sauntered to my side. You weren't the only one who learned chess from her grandfather. Sacrificing a knight to capture the queen is sometimes necessary, Victor snarled, lunging, but guards restrained him. Price opened the titanium case, extracted 1 drive. Torch the others, and your daughter walks away unscathed. Despair threatened to cave my chest, but Thomas's earlier words echoed. Redundancy survives. I met his eyes, subtle nod. Thomas lifted his phone. Agreed. But first release the safety on your rifle. Snipers require 2-factor authorization. He tapped a command. The screen zoomed. The crosshair vanished, rifle lowered. The sniper's comms hijacked. Price's smile faltered. Meredith seized the moment. Martin, confess on record now, or your partner list gets emailed. You know how many senators have elections this year. Catherine's mask cracked. Fury flared. Martin, shoot them. But Price hesitated. Power seesawed in his eyes. Between alliance with Catherine and self-preservation. I drew the pearl rook from my clutch. Castles move straight, remember? Here's my direct line. I hurled the rook at the glass ceiling. It shattered, triggering alarms. Guards flinched. Victor tackled the nearest. Meredith grabbed Price's wrist, twisting until his phone clattered. Catherine screamed, drawing a small pistol from her bodice. She aimed at Clara's image on the screen, thumb poised over a remote trigger. Time slowed. A clockwork nightmare. Then, the conservatory doors burst open. Journalists flooded in, cameras rolling, led by an activist live streamer Meredith had texted earlier. Plan B now. They caught every angle. Price's gunmen, Catherine's weapon, the shattered ceiling. Catherine pivoted, face caught in the camera lights. Her pistol trembled. Drop it, Kate, Victor said softly. It's over. Her eyes settled on him. Betrayal, sorrow, venom. Then she fired, not at him or Clara, but at the central sprinkler valve overhead. Water erupted, drenching the room, dousing electronics, obscuring cameras in kaleidoscopic spray. Chaos detonated. Price bolted, guards shoved through journalists. Catherine vanished into the corridor. I wiped water from my lashes, searching for Thomas and Clara. Sirens swelled. Outside, the police Victor's security team had summoned en route. Red and blue lights strobed through the broken ceiling. I caught a glimpse of Catherine, soaked gown clinging, sprinting across the lawn toward the boathouse. In her hand, she clutched the now empty titanium case. Determination ignited inside. Me. I vaulted a toppled chair, skidded through puddles, and gave chase. Behind me, Victor shouted my name. I didn't slow. The night air slapped my cheeks, heavy with sea brine. Catherine reached the boathouse pier, leapt onto a cigarette boat idling with engines purring. I grasped her wrist before she could cast off. Catherine's eyes blazed. "Let go, Lena. You've already lost." I tightened my grip. Not my daughter. Not my family. Her other hand produced a flare gun, muzzle pressing against my sternum. "Always the queen," she hissed. "Time to topple." Light flared scarlet, the world seared white. The flare's incandescent roar swallowed the night, a dragon's breath that singed my eyelashes and painted every raindrop neon blood. I twisted sideways just as Catherine fired, fiery magnesium streaking past my ribs to explode against the pier piling. Flames bloomed across rain-slick wood, smoke writhing upward in greasy ropes. Catherine wrenched her wrist free, leapt into the boat, and slammed the throttle. Twin engines howled, bow knifed through black water. I lunged, fingers grazing the transom, but the slick fiberglass jerked away, nearly dragging me into the bay. I clawed back onto the burning pier, lungs searing with smoke. Victor's shout carried over sirens. He barreled down the incline with Thomas and 2 police officers in tow. Behind them, emergency strobes bathed Price Manor in feverish color. Crimson. Truths pulsing against ivory lies. I pointed toward the retreating boat, silhouette shrinking under a sky-bruised purple. "She has the case," Thomas cursed. "The drives?" "Empty. She grabbed it as decoy." I wheezed. "But she doesn't know we copied them." An officer radioed Harbor Patrol, but I knew Catherine's head start and the storm churned. Waters favored her. Victor wrapped a fire blanket around my shoulders, eyes glossy with unshed devastation. "You could have been killed," he said. "I'm not ready to be a martyr," I replied, voice hoarse. "We still have work." Back? Inside the manor, chaos coagulated into procedure. Police cuffed Price, reading rights that fluttered ineffectual against his sputtering denials. Journalists swarmed, microphones like spines on a sea urchin. Clara rushed to my side, fingers searching for injury. I kissed her forehead, tasting salt from tears and rain. Meredith cornered the lead detective, providing the encrypted backups and audio files. His face stiffened as he listened to Price brag about buying senators like hors d'oeuvres. He signaled for additional units. Amid the swirl, I caught sight of the chess king, knocked beneath a table during the melee. I collected it, its matte surface now chipped. Pieces fall, but the game persists. Police secured statements past midnight. It was nearly 2 a.m. when we finally left the estate, exhaustion flaring behind my eyes like failing filaments. At the Yatsatsi carriage house, Clara brewed cocoa while Meredith locked the remaining drives in a floor safe installed that morning by Victor's security team. Thomas slumped onto the sofa, head in his hands. "Charges won't vanish overnight. Price still wields influence." "Influence fractures under sunlight," I said. "And tonight we cracked the clouds." Victor emerged from a phone call with the district attorney. "Price is refusing to post bail until Catherine is found." He looked at me. "Which means he believes she's his only leverage." Clara's mug rattled. Mom, she knows where we live. I doubt she'll come here, I said. She's hemorrhaging allies. Her next move will be extraction. Foreign jurisdiction, new identity. Thomas rubbed swollen wrists. We need to anticipate her path. Meredith nodded. Interpol watch list, airport alerts. She opened her laptop, keys clacking. At dawn, a courier, legitimate this time, delivered a sealed FBI envelope. Notification of formal withdrawal of charges. Thomas's shoulders sagged as he read. Joy and relief warred on his face. Yet celebration tasted premature. Price still had resources, and Catherine roamed free. We gathered in the war room. I gestured to the rook and king positioned at board center. Castles and kings. The reigning monarch has fallen. Now the castle flees. To corner her, we study her fortress. Victor spread Catherine's financials. She owns a vineyard in Tuscany. Remote, discreet. Meredith cross-referenced flight plans. Private jet filed to take off at 09:30 from Teterboro. Destination Florence. Passenger list sealed under diplomatic charter. Clara's breath hitched. 9:30? That's less than 2 hours. I glanced at Thomas. Could we legally board a charter flight cleared for takeoff? If we arrive with a federal seizure order, he said. But we need a judge. Meredith dialed U.S. Attorney Lowell, a former classmate. Persuasion poured from her like acid etched with courtesy. Within minutes, Lowell agreed to meet us at Teterboro with marshals, provided we delivered irrefutable evidence linking Catherine to Price's crimes. Thomas popped open the laptop. The coaxial cable Catherine shredded? I salvaged its microcontroller. It logged every authentication token her flare gun triggered. Time-stamped. Matches the sniper feed. I smiled grimly. Irrefutable. We sped to the airport in a black SUV, sirens clearing morning commuters. On the tarmac, Lowell waited beside 3 U.S. Marshals. The Gulfstream's engines idled, stairs lowered. A ground crewman confirmed a lone passenger on board. Lowell scanned the microcontroller logs, brows rising. Combined with the drives, this nails her. He signed the seizure order. Marshals approached the jet. The lead tapped its fuselage. Moments later, Catherine descended, sunglasses masking her expression, but posture straight as an I-beam. I stepped forward. Game over, Kate. She removed her glasses, eyes scorching. You think this ends with me? Your king fell. You're out of moves. She smiled. Small, chilling. My king. You never understood the board, Magdalena. I was the king. Then she lifted both wrists, surrendering to the cuffs. As marshals escorted her away, she called back, Pawns reach the 8th rank and become queens. Remember that? Her laughter, brittle as broken glass, echoed across the asphalt. We watched the marshal's convoy depart. Lowell shook Thomas's hand. Your testimony will be crucial. Thomas nodded, eyes on Clara. First, a postponed ceremony. Lowell smiled. Take a week. You've earned normalcy, if normal exists. June 10th, noon. St. Brigid's glowed under cloudless sky. No rain, no snipers, no secrets gnawing like parasites. The pews filled with genuine smiles instead of morbid curiosity. The florist replaced peonies with sunflowers, Clara's new choice. They face the light even after storms break their stems. Victor stood beside me in the vestibule, pride polishing his features smoother than any apology could. Our arms linked around Clara's once more, though this time her laugh fluttered unburdened. Thomas waited at the altar, eyes luminous. No titanium case shackled him, only a plain silver band he twisted nervously. The organist began Pachelbel's canon. We stepped forward. Candle flames bobbed approval. Guests exhaled. Finally, Father Aldrich's voice carried warm as sun-soaked stone. Beloved, I listened, heart unspooling decades of hurt, knitting them into something resilient. Family, I realized, is Not a castle or a king. It is the board itself, scarred, enduring, holding space for conflict and reconciliation alike. Clara echoed vows that trembled with tears. Thomas answered firm, steady. Rings exchanged, hands bound with silk once again, but this time eternity felt plausible. Father Aldrich lifted his arms. I now pronounce you. The sanctuary door burst open. A courier, a real one, rushed. Down the aisle, face ashen. He handed me a small padded envelope, then retreated. I hesitated, pulse hammering. Clara's eyes widened. Thomas's grip tightened on her hands. I opened the envelope. Inside lay a single rook carved from volcanic glass and a memory card labeled Rensselaer Labs. No note, my stomach dropped. A new player, a new board. Middle aisle gasped as I looked up. Somewhere, the delicate machinery of our piece had already begun to rattle. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. I pocketed the rook. Victor's question hovered in his eyes. Another battle? I answered with the faintest nod. Father Aldrich cleared his throat. Resuming, I now pronounce you husband and wife. He beamed. You may kiss. Cheers erupted. Clara and Thomas sealed their vow. The congregation rose in applause. Bubbles replaced rice to avoid avian casualties. Hundreds of iridescent spheres drifting, like fragile planets around our laughter. Outside, sunshine gilded the church steps. Yet my gaze fixed on the rook, heavy in my palm, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Whoever delivered the envelope had predicted Catherine's fall and timed their opening gambit to the second vow. The rook's volcanic glass felt warm, as if it contained embers from a deeper furnace. Victor joined me, shielding his eyes against the sun. Do we dare open the memory card today? Not today, I said, sliding the rook into my clutch beside the pearl and black relics. Today belongs to Clara and Thomas. Tomorrow we raise the drawbridge again. He squeezed my hand. Together. We watched our newlyweds descend the steps into a shower of bubbles and applause. For a brief, shimmering moment, the Kai world paused. Pawn, rook, king, queen, all suspended in the same fragile piece. But deep within the volcanic rook, another clock had begun to tick. Tick. The volcanic rook felt impossibly warm against my palm, as though the lava that forged it still roiled somewhere beneath its glossy skin, measuring time in slow, unstoppable pulses. Each pulse echoed the staccato hammer of my heart while I stood on St. Brigid's sunlit steps and watched Clara and Thomas vanish into a glittering corridor of bubbles. Around me, guests clapped and laughed, unaware that another unseen clock had begun to move its hands toward catastrophe. I wanted to chase after them, shout warnings about rooks in laboratories and threats wrapped in envelopes, but Father Aldrich intercepted me with congratulations and a paper program he insisted I keep for remembrance. Remembrance, such a brittle word, utterly unfit for mortals trapped in present danger. Victor sensed my fracture. He maneuvered through the crowd until he reached my side, slipping an arm around my waist in a gesture so familiar it startled me. We'll handle this, he murmured into my ear, his breath carrying a hint of consecrated wine from the reception toast. We always do. Always? Perhaps. But my knees wobbled under the weight of too many alwayses. I drew a steadying breath, forced a smile for the passing photographer, then guided Victor toward the limousine idling by the curb. Thomas and Clara had chosen a midnight blue vintage Rolls for their getaway. Ours was a far less romantic black town car with tinted windows that now felt like a bunker on wheels. Inside, I withdrew the small memory card labeled Rensselaer Labs and inserted it into Victor's phone. A single encrypted file appeared. We exchanged glances, neither of us eager to pierce the veil, both knowing we must. Victor's thumbs flew across glass. The phone requested a passphrase. A pop-up prompt offered a hint. Novum portum aperis. Latin. You will open a new gate. Victor typed a series of phrases. College mottos, family crests, fragments of Virgil. All wrong. On impulse, I entered. The coordinates etched on the Pearl Rook's base. 0608. The phone chirped, screen blossoming into a video window. A man appeared, salt and pepper beard, horn-rimmed glasses, lab coat edged with a patch reading Rensselaer Innovation Center. He held up a newspaper dated that morning and began speaking in precise, educated tones. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hawthorne," he said as though addressing me personally. "If you are viewing this, my patrons have failed to acquire the Rook drives. Their loss is regrettable, but not fatal. By the time you watch, RIC's Phase 3 trial will have commenced. We require 36 uninterrupted hours. Should you choose to interfere, be advised. Your daughter's husband remains a useful variable. Variables can be deleted. Deliver the original dataset from Waverly and Price to my facility in East Greenbush by 18 Salar today. Place it beside the Rook on the checkpoint desk. Do not notify law enforcement. Do not attempt heroics. The board resets at dusk. The video ended abruptly, replaced by GPS coordinates and a countdown ticking from 06:15:42. Victor cursed under his breath. I replayed the threat, freezing the frame on the scientist's ID badge. Dr. Leonid Faust, Director of Genetic Frontiers. My chest tightened. Faust. A name stolen from fable, now resurrected in a real hell. We rerouted the limo to the hotel where Clara and Thomas would greet evening guests at a subdued champagne brunch, an improvised replacement for the formal ballroom reception that Price's meltdown had canceled. Sunflowers adorned every table, but laughter felt brittle, like spun sugar exposed to humidity. Clara's face lit when she saw us approach, until she noticed our storm-worn expressions. Excusing herself from a knot of college friends, she whisked us into a private dressing suite where Thomas adjusted his bow tie before a gilt mirror. "What happened?" she asked, voice low. I handed Thomas the phone. He watched the video twice, jaw hardening. Faust is Price's contagion whisperer. He engineered blank check bio patents. I heard rumors he wanted to weaponize CRISPR for profit. "Why target you?" Victor asked. Thomas pinched the bridge of his nose. "Because the SEC drives contain email threads confirming Price funneled NIH grants to Faust's shadow lab. If Faust's trial fails, whistleblower proof becomes catastrophic." Clara's fingers trembled. "What kind of trial?" "I don't know," Thomas said. "But 36 hours is an incubation window." That single sentence cracked, open every maternal nightmare I'd buried. I pictured Thomas strapped to some chromium gurney, Clara sobbing behind quarantine glass. Meredith arrived within the hour, hair still damp from a rare attempt at leisure. One look at our faces and her shoulders squared into battle stance. "I have courtroom depositions tomorrow," she grumbled, scanning the video. "Guess I'll file them from the road?" Victor frowned. "Road? We're calling the Bureau." Faust threatened Thomas. Meredith shook her head. If Faust senses feds, he'll trigger whatever kill switch he's devised. We need infiltration, not invasion. She produced a small metal case labeled Helios Tech, remote for a wearable body cam set to live stream to encrypted cloud. Proof in real time. Thomas eyed the gadget warily. "You want to deliver me like bait?" "Information war," Meredith said. "We feed him a decoy drive. He exposes his operation on camera. We extract you." Clara squared her shoulders, beside her husband. "We," she echoed. "I'm going too." "No," I and Thomas said simultaneously. She glared. "You need someone Faust values," she insisted. "If he sees me, wife of his variable, he'll think twice." Victor interjected gently. "Sweetheart, leverage cuts both ways. He might use you against Thomas." Clara's jaw firmed. I refuse to sit home again while men with briefcases fight over my future. She caught my gaze, challenge and plea mingling. I saw an echo of my own younger defiance. And I felt the truth. She deserved agency in her own story. I nodded slowly. We go together, but on our terms. By 3:30, we were wheels up in a chartered turboprop bound for Albany. Meredith's friend at the Attorney General's office loaned us the plane under the guise of urgent legal courier. Clouds stacked like bruised anvils below. Clara's hand found mine across the aisle. Thomas rehearsed code phrases with Meredith. If he said sunflower, marshals would raid within 10 minutes. If rook, immediate breach. Victor disassembled and cleaned a compact Sig Sauer under a blanket. Habitual, meditative, terrifying. I reviewed Faust's CV printed from LinkedIn before his account vanished. Postdoc at RPI, DARPA Fellow, keynote speaker on genome sovereignty, 4 patents sealed under national security exemptions, a ghost blinking across ivory towers. At Albany International, a black Suburban awaited. An ex-ranger named Vega drove, part of Victor's expanding security cadre. As we descended the Hudson Valley, pine forests closed like silent juries. Rain began again, fine and slanting. Rensselaer Innovation Center squatted beyond chain link. Fences outside East Greenbush, an old semiconductor fab retrofitted into a biotech warren. Sodium vapor lamps flickered over loading bays where no trucks idled, too quiet for a place supposedly in deep phase trials. Vega parked behind an overgrown hedgerow. He handed us earpieces and night vision specs. Meredith synced the body cam, feed to the cloud, pinged Lowell's deputy with a silent alert. Waiting for code sunflower. We approached on foot along a drainage culvert. The volcanic rook in my pocket pulsed warmth as though guiding us. At a side entrance, a biometric panel awaited. Thomas swiped a stolen clearance card Meredith had fished from Price's coat lining. The door hissed open. Inside smelled of bleach and ozone. Emergency lighting glowed crimson along baseboards, casting monstrous shadows. We threaded corridors lined with frosted glass labs, servers blinking behind water-cooled racks. Clara slipped her hand into Thomas's. I walked behind them, palms, sweating. A steel door marked checkpoint loomed. On a pedestal, a glass cloche waiting like a bell jar for some dark specimen. I placed the volcanic rook beneath. Its warmth intensified, igniting hairline fissures that glowed ember orange before cooling. The cloche lowered automatically, sealing it. A scanner flickered. Identity confirmed. Please proceed. Faust greeted us beyond in a cavernous atrium bathed in bluish light. He wore no lab coat now, only a charcoal suit, gloves, and an expression of clinical curiosity. Magdalena, Victor, Clara, such illustrious company. His gaze lingered on Thomas, and the linchpin himself. Thomas extended the decoy drive. Faust accepted it, sliding it into a console. Authenticating. He smiled faintly at the progress bar. Excellent. Clara stepped forward. We upheld our end. Release any hold you claim over us. Faust's eyes gleamed. In due course. But first, a demonstration. He gestured to a glass elevator descending from upper mezzanine. Inside, 2 subjects in hospital gowns stood. 1, male, 1 female, early 20s, eyes glazed. IV lines fed bioluminescent fluid into their veins. CRISPR-X therapy, Faust explained, repairing metabolic disorders, or inducing them. He pressed a button. The elevator doors opened onto a testing chamber. Robotic arms adjusted nozzles above the subjects. Thomas's voice cracked. You're using live humans? Phase 3 demands authenticity, Faust replied. Clara trembled. I squeezed her shoulder. Meredith whispered into her collar mic. Sunflower in 5. Faust touched another control. The robotic nozzles hissed, releasing a fine mist. The subjects coughed, then convulsed. Monitors spiked. Stop! Thomas surged forward. Guards seized him. Faust lifted a tablet, reading aloud vitals. On set. Within 90 seconds. Beautiful. Rage overwhelmed me. I grabbed Clara's discarded veil from my bag. She'd insisted on keeping it, for luck, and flung it at a laser sensor near the ceiling. The sensor interpreted foreign debris. As breach klaxons erupted, lights strobed. Guards shouted. Meredith's mic picked chaos. Sunflower! Faust spun toward me, eyes wide. Thomas wrenched free, tackling a guard. Victor's SIG flashed. A second guard collapsed with a non-lethal round to the knee. Over PA speakers, automated. Voice droned. Containment failure. Decontamination protocol engaged. Steel shutters began descending over exits. Vega's team burst through a side corridor, exchanging fire with security. Clara dragged one of the test subjects from the elevator, while I heaved the other onto a gurney. Faust retreated toward a reinforced door labeled Gate B. He slammed. A palm against the pad. Door slid half open. I sprinted, catching the edge before it sealed. On the other side sprawled a vault lined with cryopods. Inside each, rows of embryos suspended in amber fluid. A single control console displayed countdown. Gate B purge in 05, guac. Faust yanked cables from the console, initiating manual override. I won't let decades of work vanish to satisfy moral squeamishness. I stepped forward. They're people, not data points, he sneered. Potential people. Until we shape them. You sound like Price. He lacked conviction. I don't. He aimed a compact pistol. Victor slipped through the door, weapon leveled. Standoff locked. 3 hearts hammered. Leonid, Victor said, voice calm. End this and walk out alive. Faust's finger whitened on the trigger. I pictured Clara outside, risking crossfire. Fury crystallized into clarity. I drew the chess king, the mat, black piece Price first sent, and hurled it at the overhead sprinkler. Glass shattered, icy water cascaded. Faust flinched, shot jerking high. A round pinged off steel. Victor fired. 1, 2, striking Faust's shoulder. He spun, dropping the gun. Alarms heightened. Chemical purge in O2 Wouth. Victor secured the pistol. Cuffed Faust with zip ties. Magdalena, we must disable purge. I accessed the soaked console, water spitting sparks. Error codes scrolled red. I keyed override sequences gleaned from Price's stolen email thread. Blessed be redundancy. Timer froze at 0:45. I exhaled ragged, knees buckling. Outside, marshals flooded corridors. Meredith guided rescue medics to the convulsing subjects. Clara supported one, whispering soothing nonsense. Faust laughed through blood-slick teeth. Stop purge, fine. But your whistleblowing drives? You gave me blanks. Triangulating the live feed now. My syndicate will trace it. Victor hauled him upright. Your syndicate's funding just evaporated. Price flipped 2 hours ago. Enjoy obscurity. Faust's smile faltered. Impossible. I pressed the rook pendant on my necklace. The volcanic rook now fused to a chain by heat. The board resets at dusk, Dr. Faust. But you'll be watching from a cage. Outside, twilight bled across the pines. Flashing strobes painted the eye. Forest carnival red. Clara and Thomas sat wrapped in blankets on the bumper of an ambulance, holding hands amid oxygen masks and IV bags. I knelt before them. Subjects stabilized, Faust in custody, embryos transferred to HHS oversight. Clara closed her eyes, tears leaking from exhaustion and relief. I brushed damp curls from her face, heart swelling with the ferocity of both tiger and dove. Meredith appeared with Lowell on speaker. Federal indictments drafted. Your live feed trending, our rook case at 1.7 million tweets. Thomas managed a weary grin. Sunflowers face the light. I squeezed his hand. Even after storms break their stems. Victor joined, slinging an arm around my shoulders. Moonlight silvered his hair. Ready to go home, Lena? Home. The word glowed ember warm, but deep inside, another pulse echoed, softer than the rook's heat yet undeniable. One final move remained. A queen hidden somewhere beyond midnight. We returned to the carriage house just past 3. While medics settled the freed test subjects into an upstairs guest room, Clara brewed tea. Rain pattered gentle as applause. I wandered into the den, where the whiteboard still mapped strings of conspiracy. At its center, next to a faded photograph of Catherine in happier days, I placed the volcanic rook. Its glow had dimmed, power spent. A phone buzzed. Victor's burner on the mantel lit. Unknown caller. He answered on speaker. Static cracked, then a digitally masked voice. Well played, Magdalena, but the rook is seldom the last piece. Queens. Move any direction, I felt ice climb my spine. Who is this? Someone who hates unfinished games? 2 days. Check your email. Click. The line died. Victor's gaze met mine over the silent rook. No rest for kingdoms built on shifting boards. Morning seeped gray through lace curtains. I drafted a single line in my journal before fatigue finally claimed me. The game continues, but I am no pawn. Then I slept, dreamless for the first time in weeks. But beyond that fragile dreamscape, another queen slid across unseen squares, plotting her opening strike. The dawn after the Rensselaer siege arrived soft and deceptive, spilling pale apricot light across our battered refuge like an apology none of us trusted. I woke in the den with my cheek pressed to Victor's shoulder, and the scent of ash and antiseptic in the air. For one fluttering second, the quiet fooled me. Then the rook on the mantel caught sunrise and winked, a tiny obsidian star reminding me the board was still set for war. Victor stirred, blinking away dreams. Any word from Lowell? He asked. I shook my head. Overnight, the federal machine had gorged on evidence, Faust's confession, Price's flipped testimony, but its gears turned slower than fear. My phone showed no alerts except a single scheduled calendar event I hadn't created. 13 Dwi, Queen's Gambit. Attached coordinates resolved to Manhattan's financial district. I roused the others. Meredith emerged from the guest room balancing a laptop and a mug that read, "Good lawyers never sleep." Clara and Thomas, exhausted but resolute, joined us in the kitchen where the coffee maker sputtered like an aged locomotive. Whoever called last night hijacked my calendar, I explained, projecting the map onto the fridge screen. Thompson Tower, the old stock ticker hub Price once chaired. Meredith's brow puckered. Buildings half vacant, perfect for clandestine meetings. Victor crossed his arms. Too predictable. Could be a trap. Isn't everything? I muttered. Thomas sipped tea. We can't ignore it. Queens move any direction. They might aim to pivot public narrative. Clara placed her palm over my fist. We end this today, Mom. Her voice no longer trembled. It rang steel. At 11:30, a security motorcade left for the city. 2 SUVs flanking Victor's bullet-resistant sedan. Vega drove. I rode shotgun, the volcanic rook suspended from my neck on its chain. Meredith monitored deep web chatter, eyes racing lines of code. News tickers flashed on roadside billboards. Genome nightmare foiled. New York couple exposes billion-dollar scheme. A photograph captured Clara and Thomas outside Rick, their blankets fluttering like capes. For once, the sensationalism felt almost righteous, but viral fame painted targets. Troll armies already spun alternate theories, staged false flag, political theater. Truth seldom outruns rumor for long. Thompson Tower's lobby stood hushed, marble floors reflecting chandeliers shaped like gilded honeycombs. A receptionist in a sleek blazer greeted us with rehearsed calm. Penthouse conference. Your party awaits. Elevator doors whispered shut behind us, glass panels revealing Midtown's jagged skyline sliding downward. On the 75th floor, The doors opened to an atrium lined with dormant trading terminals, once the synapses of capital, now relics. At the far end, a solitary figure sat on a dais beneath defunct bullet tickers. She wore a tailored ivory pantsuit and stiletto heels. Her hair, raven black streaked with platinum, was coiled in a crown-like braid. A queen indeed. She rose, graceful as knife smoke. Magdalena Hawthorne, finally. I stepped forward. You know my name. Yours? Esme Bishop, she said. Portfolio architect. I once managed Catherine's offshore flows before she grew sloppy. My investors distrust sloppy, Meredith whispered into my ear. Shadow fund legend. Moves trillions through shell loops. Alleged link to 3 coups. Victor's hand hovered near his jacket holster. Esme's smile never reached her eyes. Relax. I dislike blood on silk. She gestured to a U-shaped table set with crystal tumblers. We remained standing. Esme continued. Price and Faust were pawns. Useful, expendable. Catherine, a knight. I nurtured her greed, but she failed. Now the board demands new alignment. I folded my arms. Then you've already lost. You're monologuing at the wrong trophy. She laughed, low. I haven't lost. I'm promoting you. The public adores your crusade. Influence flows toward you like iron files to a magnet. Imagine directing that current instead of fighting. It. Thomas scoffed. Blackmail disguised as opportunity. Esme's gaze flicked to him. Not blackmail, symbiosis. I deliver exoneration, you deliver legitimacy. Headlines shift. Global financier elevates heroic couple to steer ethical. Investment fund, billions saved, billions earned, Clara answered, voice steady. Ethical by whose definition? Yours? Esme shrugged elegant shoulders. Ethics are narratives. I own printing presses. I felt anger blaze, but a colder calculation followed. Esme sought leverage over hearts, not courts. So I offered a queen's own gambit. I unclasped the volcanic rook, set it on the table's edge. You're mistaken about who prints stories. People do, collectively. We gave them truth. They amplified it. You can't buy that chorus, only mimic. Esme's eyes narrowed. Sentiment doesn't move markets. Fear and greed do. I nodded at Meredith. She tapped her tablet. The atrium screens flickered to life, streaming a live feed from Lowell's press conference. The Rensselaer indictments. Faust's shackled silhouette filled the podium screens, flanked by marshals. Esme's expression chilled. You shared? The sunrise before final negotiation. Bold. Victor stepped beside me. Negotiation ended when Faust named you as Project Regent funder. She didn't flinch. Circumstantial. No transfers bear my signature. Not yet, Meredith replied. But your voice does. She played an audio clip. Esme discussing embryo price points with Faust, captured by RIC's ServNet while we infiltrated. Shock rippled Esme's composure. Then she smiled again, shark bright. Release that, and global markets convulse. Pension funds, research grants, collateral damage enormous. Are you prepared for the chaos your righteousness will inflict? Silence stretched, tension taut as piano wire. Outside the windows, clouds rolled like silent artillery. Clara stepped forward. Chaos already lives in our veins because of people like you. The only cure is daylight. She produced the final USB, identical evidence triple-backed. She Sai-Chi placed it atop the rook. Esme exhaled a small sigh. So be it. She clicked a pen. I braced for gas or hidden darts. Instead, she nodded ever so slightly. Elevator doors pinged. 4 men in charcoal suits entered, each with diplomatic badges. They glanced between Esme and us, uncertain. Esme addressed them. Gentlemen, change of plan. The assets are no longer viable. We dissolve the Algarve accounts immediately, one protested. Board-level sign-off. My signature is enough, she hissed. I realized we weren't her enemies. We were her alibi. She would scapegoat Price and Faust, pivot her empire to new ventures, claim moral awakening, the queen sacrificing pawns to cross the board ahead of us. Victoria's stories risk becoming stepping stones for subtler villains. I needed a final move, one she couldn't pivot from. I placed my phone on the table, microphone blinking. This conversation's been streaming live to over 3 million viewers. I lied with the calm of a lifelong mother. Manipulating markets in real time? Now that does move indices. Esme's eyes widened, a flash of calculation, then alarm as she weighed probabilities. To her disciples behind, I added, "Federal agents will arrive in under 5 minutes. Their chief witness remains Ms. Bishop, assuming she cooperates." Men retreated 2 steps, loyalty fracturing at the whiff of self-preservation. Esme's breath came tight. "You bluff." But doubt poisoned her. And doubt is lethal for queens whose power depends on certainty. She reached toward the rook, perhaps to pocket it as souvenir, but Victor slid it back toward me. Game concluded. Sirens keened below, echo rising like judgment. Esme straightened her jacket, smoothing pride despite defeat. "You haven't won, Magdalena. You've merely delayed entropy." I pocketed the rook. "Entropy is universal. I'll settle for justice." Marshals stormed the atrium. Esme raised her hands, offering wrists with theatrical resignation. Cameras flashed. The world recorded another titan brought down by her own hubris. Outside, storm clouds finally emptied over Manhattan, rinsing sidewalks of traffic grime. We stood beneath the building's awning, watching raindrops shatter neon reflections. Thomas exhaled. "Is it really done?" Meredith checked her phone. "Bishop's assets frozen. DOJ negotiating plea." Victor slipped his hand into mine. "Civilization limps forward another day." Clara laughed softly. "Then let's limp home." 2 weeks later, the carriage house garden flourished brighter than I'd ever seen it. Sunflowers taller than Clara nodded in lazy July air. We hosted a backyard dinner. No tuxedos, no headlines. Just family and friends sharing lemon rosemary chicken while fireflies lit the dusk. Thomas proposed a toast, raising his iced tea. "To Magda, our queen on the board," I protested. Embarrassed. He continued, "She taught us that castles may move straight, but queens command every direction." Laughter and applause crashed against my cheeks in warm waves. I felt the rook pendant heavy against my sternum and understood I'd carry its lesson forever. Vigilance woven into love. Later, when night pooled velvet beneath the maples, Victor and I lingered on the porch swing. Crickets hummed a lullaby, older than memory. "I never asked," he said quietly. "Do you regret standing that day at the wedding?" I leaned against him, watching Clara twirl beneath string lights with Thomas. Regret? No. The board was always there. We finally saw the pieces. He squeezed my hand and moved them. A shooting star seared across the sky, unburdened by our earthly machinations. Tomorrow, other rooks might appear, other queens plot. But tonight, the world felt briefly check-free, and that was enough. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.